welcome back to my channel. My name's Christina and today I'm gonna be ranking all of my eyeshadow palettes. So basically I took all of my eyeshadow palettes and I ranked them from my favorite to my least favorite, and I'm gonna be sharing that with you guys today. Now before I jump into ranking all of my eyeshadow palettes, definitely make sure to hit that subscribe button because I do upload every single day, Monday through Friday at 2 p.m. Pacific Standard, and don't want you guys to miss out on any of my videos if these are interesting to you. For the most part, I do a lot of project panning, shop my stashes, miscellaneous Harry Potter videos, the like. So if any of that sounds good to you, definitely make sure to hit that button. And now let me just be really cutthroat and rank my eyeshadow palettes. To be honest, I kind of feel like a parent, and like you're not supposed to pick your favorite child, but like we all know you have your favorite child. But I felt really guilty and really bad while doing this, so I don't know what that says about my emotional stability. Now I'm going to tell you how I rank my eyeshadow palette children. Now I'm going to start from my least favorite and go to my favorite because I like getting the bad news out of the way first. So I'm going to break it to the children I like the least and praise the one I like the most. So my bottom palettes, I'm just gonna lump them all together because they're actually by the same brand. Now I don't think this is a reflection on the brand as a whole, it was just I don't care for this formulation, and that is the new Wet n Wild palettes that I got. I have the Rosé in the Air, the limited edition Stop Ruffling My Feathers, and Flock Party, and I don't really care for any of these. Now, I love the color stories of these, but I don't like the formula. I don't find, there's something just missing for me. They don't really go on my eyes smooth. They don't really blend well. They don't overall look good on the lids for me. And I know a lot of people like these, but something about them on my skin, on my lids, they don't blend, they just don't look good, and I never want to reach for these. I actually had Stop Ruffling My Feathers in my Shop My Stash last month, and I used it a couple of times, and it just was underwhelming. There just isn't much to them, and these will probably eventually be decluttered because I just don't reach for them. And again, I know a lot of people do like the new formula, but I definitely prefer Wet n Wild's old formula. I don't know if I'm alone in this or not, but these are definitely at the bottom in my eyeshadow collection, unfortunately. Now the next one I don't really feel great about because I haven't really gotten a chance to play with it, but the couple of times I have played with it so far, I'm a little underwhelmed by it, and it's the Tarte Rainforest of the Sea. I think this is like number 3 or something. I got this in a BoxyCharm, and it's just a neutral shimmer palette, and I don't know. I know there are some ride or dies for Tarte, and everything I've ever tried from Tarte, I just don't think it fits me as a person because I never connect with their products. Does that make sense? It's like I like them and I know for the most part their quality is there, but it's like I don't feel anything when I use these products. It sounds so weird. It's just something about it just doesn't wow me. It doesn't entrance me in any way. It's, to me, their products are remarkably unremarkable. Like, they're just very ordinary to me. I don't know, I'm not blown away with this palette. I don't think quality is bad, and let me like preface all of this. For the most part, everything that I have in my collection is good, like good quality. It's just certain things about it make it less desirable than others. And this one, I mean, for the most part, it goes on my lids fine. It looks okay. It's just, it doesn't wow me, and it's just incredibly ordinary, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. It works for some people. I just don't think it fits me as a person. I'm gonna keep playing with this. The next few palettes are all from BoxyCharm. I think BoxyCharm needs to stop sending me palettes because I just am not thrilled with them, apparently. So the next palette at the bottom is my Ace Beauté Grandiose palette. I was so excited about this palette when we got it in our BoxyCharm. I like the color story. I think the color story is pretty, but I don't really care for the formula. Again, a lot of my issues with these shadows is formula-wise. This one feels really dry to me, and because it's dry and I have dry skin overall, it sometimes sits in the texture of my skin weird, and I don't really have textured eyelids, but it's almost like this emphasizes any sort of line I have on my eyelids, and because I have such hooded lids, it can sometimes look like crepey and old, and I just find that I feel like I look old when I wear this. Like, it just sits in the lines of my eyes. Like, it just sinks into everything, and it just doesn't look blended. It doesn't look smooth, and I don't like that. I don't like looking older than I am. This might be another one that will eventually be decluttered because every time I've tried it, I've been disappointed in it. and it makes me really, really sad because I think overall the color story is beautiful, and I've heard so many good things about this brand. I don't know if the ones in BoxyCharm are different than their normal stuff, but I feel like I always hear people talking really highly of their formula, but I wasn't impressed with this. The next palette on my list near the bottom is another palette that came in BoxyCharm, and that's the Nightingale Pretty Vulgar palette. Now, I actually really do like this palette. I think formula, it's really nice. The only reason I have it so far on the bottom is because I forget to reach for this. I don't know why, but it slips my mind, and I don't even have that many cool tone palettes. But even when I think cool tone, I don't think of this palette. It's like it completely is erased from my memory. And I think part of it is because looking at it, it's just not that inspiring to look at. Even when I'm thinking of cool tone looks, I don't think of this palette because looking at it, I don't really get inspired. It's very weird. It's just not a very inspiring layout. I don't really like the layout of it. I like the concept of it. I think it's cute, and overall I get it. It's like an aesthetic, I get it, but looking at it, the layout doesn't really do anything for me. I just am underwhelmed by it. Now, when I do force myself essentially to use this, I do really like it. I think formula wise it's really good. From what I remember, it's a good price for like a higher end technically palette. I just don't know what it is. I'm just completely underwhelmed by everything about this palette. So I had to put it near the bottom but again, it's not bad. It's just for some reason I never remember it. These next two are at the bottom, and I want to say RIP to my good friend Hush and Bad Habit. But these are near the bottom. These are actually pretty good palettes, but they aren't even available anymore from what I know because I think Hush got shut down, which that kind of sucks. But I'm going to put these two together at the bottom, and it's these Bad Habit, Aphrodite, and Athena palettes. I really like these. These were dupes for the Huda Beauty palettes. And overall, I think formula is really nice. I think color story is really nice. I mean, they literally stole it from Huda Beauty. So, I mean, she did a good job on the color story. I think overall, these are really nice palettes. I just haven't been reaching for them very much lately. And I don't think it's because they're bad palettes. I think I used them a lot when I first got them, but haven't been reaching for them. You can't even buy them anymore now. I felt like they needed to be near the bottom because I don't really talk about them anymore and I don't really use them as much. So I just needed to put them near the bottom because I clearly have other palettes that are clearly favorites over these guys. This next palette is technically one of like my small palettes. It's a quad, and it's the Kat Von D Shade and Light Eye palette in the color Rust. I really like this little palette. I think the formula is just perfection. Now, I have not been buying from Kat Von D. This was a purchase I made over a year ago now. I don't purchase from Kat Von D anymore, but I can't knock her for products that she had already developed or she has developed that are good, that are in my collection. And this is one of them. I think overall, this is a good formula. It's nice and smooth and buttery and beautiful. The only reason it's this low down is because this is another one of those palettes that I never think to reach for, which is unfortunate because I think when I do reach for it, I just remember how much I love it. This is a great companion palette, and I don't know why I don't reach for it. This is probably going to be a palette I will throw in my Shop My Stash next month just to get some more use out of it because I do really enjoy this little guy when I do reach for it. Now, I got mine at TJ Maxx for like $7, which I think is a better price for this. I think on Sephora, these were running for what, like $24? I think that's too high in my personal opinion, so I would dock it points for that as well. But overall, it's a solid little quad. Next palette near the naughty list. I feel like I'm doing like my naughty list of palettes like here at the bottom, but my next palette is the Jcat Beauty Santa Monica 24 eyeshadow palette. And this palette I really wanted to like. I really wanted to like this palette. Like, look at that color concept. I love it. It screams autumn to me. It just screams beautiful sunsets in the late fall. I love it. I love this palette as a concept. I don't, however, like the formula very much. You can work with this formula, I believe, but it is a little bit on the drier side, and from what I've learned of myself, I don't tend to like super dry formula. I can deal with slightly dry eyeshadow formulas because sometimes they work well. This isn't one of those. It's dry. It can sometimes come off patchy because it's dry, and it's just a pain in the butt to blend. So that's why this is so low. This also has a really funky like chemical smell, which drives me a little crazy. This also came to me shattered at one point, so I had to repress this shadow up here I seem to have repressed it fine, but I did lose some of it. And because of that, it is a little bit messy in here, which sucks. So they shatter kind of easy. I just wish the formula was a little smoother is all. But overall, I really like the colors of this palette is completely unique in my collection. I don't have anything with this color story. And for that, I want to love it, but I wish the formula was just a little smoother. The next palette I'm gonna show you guys is one that I actually feel kind of blasphemous for putting this low on my list. And it's a Kat Von D product, and it's not because I don't buy from her anymore, but I have noticed since I've bought this palette, I've noticed with more experience with eyeshadows that I don't really like the formula of these, and that is actually... I feel so bad doing this because this is such an iconic palette, but the Kat Von D Me Vita Loca. Do not get me wrong, I am wearing shadows from this palette on my eyes today, and don't twist my words in it. This is a beautiful palette. You guys have probably all seen this. I feel like this is one of the more iconic Kat Von D products that has ever come out. Mine is very dirty. I'm sorry. I need to wipe it down. I love everything about this. I love the concept of this palette. I actually do like the formula, but in comparison to other palettes in my collection, it's not my favorite. I don't think it's a bad formula. It's just slightly drier than some of my more favorite eyeshadow palettes. Even this palette in comparison to the Kat Von D Quad, the formulas are completely different. The Quad is a lot smoother than this one. This does have a slight dry texture, which makes it a little hard for me to blend and a little harder to get as much pigment in one swipe. You have to build up the color with these, and I have had this palette for a while, so it's probably just going to keep getting worse because I'm pretty sure I've had it. I mean, it has a 12-month shelf life, and I've had it for what, 2-3 years since it's come out. Now again, I used it today and I think it worked fine. Overall, I have noticed even when I first used this, the formula was a little bit drier and a little harder to work with, but again, not bad. It's not that dry, but that's why it's so low. I'm sorry. Next palette is another one I kind of feel bad about, but it's the BH Cosmetics Deluxe Carli Bybel palette. I really liked this when I first bought it. I mean, I still think it's very beautiful to look at. I think the colors are pretty. I just don't find this inspiring in any way, and I find that every look I create with this looks pretty similar. I did a 3 looks 1 palette with this, and even the looks in that video, I went back and watched it later and I was like, these all kind of look the same to me. They don't look that different. I mean, they do enough to warrant a different look, because you can create more orangey looks, more pinky looks, and more purple, but they all kind of blend the same way, and I find because of that I don't gravitate towards this palette as much anymore. Formula wise, this is really good. It makes me really curious about other BH Cosmetics palettes, which I have never tried, unfortunately, because I'm trying not to buy as many eyeshadow palettes. I just look at this palette and I'm just not inspired to create anything at all, and I hate that because I think overall this is a beautiful palette. I just don't know why after a while, I guess I got bored of it, and it just wasn't very creatively stimulating for me anymore. It just felt like I was creating the same kind of looks over and over again, and I don't really care to do that. Okay, next palette I'm going to mention is such a good palette. The formula is good even now, but I had to put it where it is on this list because I tried to pan this bad boy last year and I got sick of it. I got so sick of it. It's my Too Faced Semi Sweet palette. I had to put it down low on this list for the most part. Now mine still smells good, which makes me happy, but as you can see, there's quite a bit of pan in here. I did not successfully completely pan this, and I have no intentions of ever trying to do that again. But overall, I do still really like this palette. The formula is still smooth and buttery. It's just, I was very uninspired with this from using it all year. But I can't knock a good palette. The shadows are just really good, and I know you're either a love it or a hate it on Too Faced eyeshadow formula. I personally love their formula. I think it's really smooth and easy to blend. They don't tend to blend together in my opinion. And I didn't want to put this palette as high up as it is right now, but I had to because the formula is just there for me. Now that I've taken a little bit of a break for it, I can look at this palette and be like, oh yeah, I want to use that. Peanut Butter is probably one of my favorite transition shades of all of my eyeshadow palettes. It's just beautiful and warm and smooth, and I love it. I again, can't knock a good formula. I had to put this where it is because I still like it overall. I just got really tired of it last year, so I had to put it kind of low on the list. Next palette is one that I've mentioned very, very many times about loving, and that is my Milani Earthly Elements palette. This is such a good little tiny palette. It has all of the neutral shades you could ever want for a natural everyday eye look. I don't know why, but Milani really knows how to put out a good eyeshadow formula. I've said this many times, I will say it many times again, the formula is nice. None of these colors skip, none of them blend horribly. They all look good. You can't really create a lot of looks with this, which is why it's a little lower on the list. I don't even care. I love this palette. It's a great little travel palette, which I have traveled with it many times. It's nice and compact. It has everything you could want in like a easy neutral look, and I like it. This next palette is one I debated on where to put it for a while, and I'm not, even with my lineup, take it with a grain of salt because this could change from day to day. I feel like right now, putting this palette in this place is okay, and that's the Marvelous Mauves palette by Dose of Colors. Some days I really don't like this, and then some days I love it because it's just a one color story. So you really have to be in the mood for mauves to want to use this palette. Now I will say I like Dose of Colors formula because of how smooth it is, but it is very powdery in my opinion. It is messy. You have to tap off your brush a lot, but a little goes a long way. So I feel like these shadows will last me forever, even if I was using them consistently, because you need so little on your brush to create full pigment, which is really, really nice. I go back and forth on this because that depends on what kind of mood I'm in, but I mean, I like the formula. I feel like, again, Dose of Colors formula is one of those that people debate on and contest about because you either like powdery formulas or you don't, and I'm okay with it. I think it is a little messy, which annoys me. As you can see, my palette's pretty gross looking on the inside, but it's just a powdery formula, but it's super pigmented, so you take some, you lose some, and I think overall these are really nice. I like the packaging. I feel like someone's gonna come for me for this palette, and that's, I have to put my Dream Street next. I know! I love this palette. This is the Dream Street palette with Kathleen Lights and ColourPop. Like, the color story is so pretty. I love ColourPop's eyeshadow formula. It's so good. The only reason I'm putting this palette where it is because the color story doesn't get used by me in the way that I think it was intended to. To be honest, I use the first row the most, and then the rest of the palette I don't touch, like, ever. I've never even dipped into this blue shade out of this palette. I've dipped into everything else at least once, but I've never touched this shade. Like, this shade still looks perfect. I haven't even swatched it because it doesn't interest me. And that's overall how I feel about this whole bottom half of this palette, which is really unfortunate as a whole. Now, I've used this as a companion palette a lot, but if I was just to grab a palette to travel with, I wouldn't grab this one because this bottom half doesn't scream at me a look for some reason. I can look at it and make one. I'm not saying that it's impossible. I just don't look at it and get that feeling. But I love this top row. There is a nice dip in this shade right here. I love this as a transition shade. It's beautiful. I love it. I love everything about a nice peachy transition shade. And I love this shade. It's also beautiful. These, though, on the eyes look really similar, and these two on the eyes look really similar. So I essentially feel like on the top row, I have the same shade repeated, and I like them, of course, because they look so similar. But that's about it, and it sucks because I think overall, beautiful palette, beautiful packaging, beautiful formula, but I don't really care for the bottom half as much as I do the top row. This next palette is one that I don't think anyone really talks about anymore because it came out so long ago, and that is the Pixie and Judy Time palette. This is a beautiful travel palette as well. It's so beautifully neutral. I forgot to include this in my favorite neutral palettes because it was hiding in my drawer and I thought I lost it, but here it is. I love this palette. I also don't think I mentioned it either though because it was limited edition, and I don't know if you can find this palette anymore, but I love it. This is such a good neutral palette. It's so easy to use if you work in like corporate America or in an office job or in a job where you're not allowed to wear blue eyeshadow. This is a good palette. Like, this is all you would really need to create really, really pretty neutral looks. The shimmers are really pretty, but not too shimmery to where it's like in your face. The matte shades blend beautifully. It's just a very easy palette. Just beautiful. I love this. This was such a good find, and it sucks that I'm pretty sure this was limited edition and you can't get it anymore because it's just such a solid little neutral palette. And I do like this. This needs to come into my Shop My Stash again soon because I do miss using it. It's just There's nothing really wrong with this palette. The only, if I have to pick one thing I don't like, it's the matte black, or it's the black shade, because it has shimmers in it. I never understand when black shadows have shimmers in it. I just don't ever use black eyeshadow either, because it's just, I feel like it's too harsh on me. That's my only complaint. Everything else is beautiful. So this next one is one that was in my neutral eyeshadow palette, and this is a little contested, guy. This is the original e.l.f. Mad for Matte palette. This is like the cool tone one. Now I know a lot of people don't like this palette. I personally really like this palette. Now, to be fair, I haven't really used this end of it very much, but I love the dark end. This matte gray color is like my favorite gray in my collection. It blends so well, it's so smooth, it's super, super pigmented, and I really like the gray. The gray makes the palette for me, but the darker end of this, like the last half of this palette, I think is really, really good. I'm not really sure about the front half because I just don't use these shades enough because they're really, really light and I have no use for them. But as far as like cool tone browns and the cool tone grays, these are really nice. I really like this palette. I feel like I can do a lot with this little palette, and I gravitate towards this palette more than I do the Pretty Vulgar palette as far as like cool tone neutrals. And for that, I had to put it pretty high up. Now this palette is one that BoxyCharm actually got right. This palette I actually really like, and it's the Violet Voss HG Holy Grail palette. I mean, overall, beautiful. This is a very similar color story to a lot of the palettes I own. This isn't very different really, but the formula is so nice. I didn't want to like this because it's an expensive palette, but I do. I like it. I like it a lot. I think the colors are really pretty. Now I will say, if I have to say something bad, I think a lot of these colors are insanely similar, so it almost feels like some of these are repeats, but I get it. They want like variation tones of browns to create more depth. I get it. Who really has time for that all the time? It's like 3 eyeshadows, I'm done. And I could have done that with half the size of this palette probably and created a lot of similar looks. But if that's the only bad thing, I'm not going to knock it too much, because overall, formula is really nice, color story is really nice. This is a nice neutral palette with pops of pink in it, so you can create a little bit more colorful looks with it as well. Overall, just really nice. I do think the packaging's a little bulky as well, but it has a nice magnetic closure, and you guys know how I feel about magnetic closures. And I just really like the palette. I think packaging wise, it's really pretty. It's just nice. BoxyCharm got this one right, so I can't knock them for that. Oh dang, this next one's from BoxyCharm too. I've just come to realize I probably just don't buy very many palettes at all on my own. So this next one is the Morphe 15D that just came in our BoxyLuxe. I talked about this in my neutral palette video, and I still like this. I think overall this is a very nice warm orange palette. I see myself getting a lot more use for this on summertime nights, like summertime date nights. Well, my husband will be back by then. And definitely in the fall, I think I'll get a lot of use out of this. I just really love the oranges. I unfortunately like the formula. You guys know how I talked so much smack about Morphe, but then I tried the formula and I couldn't even talk that much smack. I think their newer packaging is a lot nicer than what their old packaging used to look like. The mirror's nice, it's affordable, like what? I can't technically say anything too bad about this palette. Now, if you do have a lot of warm oranges, I can see how this is really boring, but you guys have seen my collection. I really don't have a palette of warm oranges. I do have a lot of neutral palettes, but they range on like just the neutral to cool tone range, and I don't have too many warm central palettes, and this is a nice one to have in my collection. I like it. I hate that I like it. So this next one is another one that you guys have heard me talk about a ton, and that's the Milani Bold Obsessions palette. It is another neutral palette, but again, Milani's formula is beautiful and wonderful, and I'm not going to spend too much time on this one just because I did talk about it in that one video, and I can't sing the praises of the shadow formula enough. So I just recently made a video on this next palette, and it is one that kind of is painful for me to talk about because we're having some trouble in paradise, and that's my Pet Mcgrath palette. I love this palette. The formula is really nice. It's beautiful packaging, although the packaging, which is one of the reasons why it's so far down, the packaging around like the mirror is starting to like lift. Like on the edge of the mirror right here, it's starting to lift. On the seams, it seems to be tearing a little bit already, and I just bought this palette in December. Also, the foil on the front of my palette is starting to wear away, which I stored this on its side, standing up, not touching anything. It's not in a drawer. It's literally on its own, not rubbing against anything, so I don't know why that's coming off already. As far as the formula of these shadows, they're beautiful. They're really, really easy to work with. I just overall don't find this very easy to make full looks with all of the time. You can definitely make a few looks with this, but I think because I'm panning this palette right now, I just find it a little boring on its own. I definitely need a companion palette with this, but it's only because altogether it can make the same sort of looks over and over again, and they're beautifully stunning looks, but I need variety because I get bored so easily. So that's the only reason why this is a little lower. Also, I think the packaging isn't that great for how much we spend for it. You're definitely spending all of the money on the actual eyeshadow formula, which is okay, but I kind of wish they would give us the option of buying the shades individually because of that. Because I definitely think this is going to be depotted, which kind of sucks because this is very expensive and I spent $50 on 6 eyeshadows when I could have bought 6 eyeshadows from ColourPop and spent way less money. You know what I mean? Like, it just, I know the shadow formula is really good and it will last me a long time, but at the same time, it's like cutting corners. I wash it off at the end of the day. Like, does it matter that it's freaking sensational? I don't know. So I had to put it a little lower. Overall, I do really like this palette. I'm not trying to say I don't. It's just there's some things with the price that I'm like, oh, I wish this was a little different. So I had to put it where it was. We're getting up there now. We're down to like the top 10 or less than the top 10. So this next palette is my Persona Identity palette. You guys have heard me say it. I love this palette. This was the palette that I wore on my wedding day because it's beautiful. It's easy to blend. It's just, I cannot sing the praises of this palette enough. If you don't own this, I think you should own it. Out of all of the palettes that I'm showing you today, even with my favorite, I think this is one that everyone needs. And I've said that before. I just think it's an overall pretty palette, and I just like this palette so much. Go buy this one. This is my last palette in here that is from BoxyCharm. And it's very high up on the list because it's beautiful and I love it. And it's the Alamar Cosmetics palette. I love this palette. Look at it. Look at it. It's so beautiful. I can't wait to start using this again because it's beautiful. I love all of the shades. For a while there, I didn't like the blue shade, but as you guys can see, I've been more adventurous lately and I really like every single shade in here. There's literally not a shade in here I don't like. So I had to put it really high up on the list. It's beautiful packaging, it's beautiful formula, they're beautiful colors. It's just everything. I feel really inspired when I look at it. It's a good palette by itself. It's a good companion palette. You can travel with this. I just love it. Everything about it. That's all I'm gonna say. This palette is another one that I've definitely been singing the praises of lately, and it is currently in my shop, my stash, and it's the Carli Picante palette. I love the formula of these. Now these I do think are a little dry, like formula wise, but they're like a smooth dry. Like they don't feel wet going onto the lid in any way, but they blend so nice. They're not too pigmented, so if you're a beginner, I think this is a good palette to start with, but if you are more advanced, I still feel like this is a palette that you can do a lot with, and you can really use like complicated techniques with. They blend really well. Like they don't blend into each other, so they don't get muddy. They're just beautiful eyeshadows, and I absolutely adore this palette. There is literally not a shade in here I don't like. Like I've used everything in this palette, literally. I'm like looking, I've literally touched every single one of these shades at least once in this palette, and I haven't even had it that long. It's just an overall stunning palette, and it's affordable. It's an indie brand. I love it. This was a very good purchase for me. All right, guys, we are to the top 3, and this actually, I feel like the top 3 move around a lot. I go from one to the other, so take the top 3 with a very loose idea of what I mean by my favorite, because this moves a lot. And okay, let's go to number 3. Number 3 is my Zodiac palette. This is another Kathleen Lights palette, and I feel like more people like Dream Street, but I've always really liked the Zodiac palette more. Or I mean, since it's come out. I'm wearing Aquarius on my lids today, and I'm wearing the Pisces on my lid today, and I just think the formula is really nice. I think overall, looking at this palette, it's more inspiring to me. I don't know, I just really like this palette. There's just so many shades in here that I like, and like I think overall I like this because it is a really good companion palette. But I mean, that's one of the reasons why it was made. It was supposed to be a companion with Dream Street, but it's a good companion palette to a lot of other palettes as well. And I just like it. I like the way the packaging looks. I'm really into zodiacs. I find them really interesting. I don't know if they're necessarily true, but I find it really interesting. I like the way the packaging feels. I like the way it looks. I just love everything about this palette. It's super affordable. It's just really versatile in my opinion, and it really inspires me to think outside of the box. So I had to put this one up high. I always want to reach for this. I used it today and it wasn't even in my everyday makeup drawer, which kind of goes against the rules I set for myself, but I really wanted to use the Aquarius today, so I did. And that's how it goes with this one. Don't care that it's not in my everyday drawer for now. I still want to use it. Number 2 is another one. I mean, all of these flip-flopped around for a while. I spent the most time on the top 3 deciding, but I had to put number 2 as the Zulu palette by Juvia's Place. I'm wearing this shade today, and I just love this palette. Again, this just inspires me to think outside the box. You guys know, as you could see, most of my eyeshadow palettes are neutral. I gravitate towards neutrals the most, but I like having palettes like this palette in my collection because it gets me to actually branch out. Not to mention, the formula of this is amazing. If I had to compare this formula to the Pat McGrath formula, in my opinion, they're very similar. Pat McGrath is still a little bit better as far as formula, but it's less inspiring than this is to me. I don't know what it is about this palette, but I love it. This was such a good purchase again because it just really gets me outside of my comfort zone. It gets me to think of color combinations I wouldn't normally do, or colors in general that I wouldn't normally wear, and I love it. Absolutely love it. It's also affordable and amazing. So then that leaves my last palette, my favorite palette as of late, as of right now, and that is the very expensive but very beautiful Friendcation palette. I didn't want to put this one as number 1 because I don't know if it's available anymore, because I think it was limited edition and it's very expensive. This is a $55 eyeshadow palette, but I don't know what it is about the formula of these eyeshadows. I can't stop using it. And this palette came out when, like October, September, sometime in there. I can't stop using this palette. Like, I just can't. I love it. I love everything about it. All of the colors are beautiful. Everything about it is beautiful. It's so neutral, but it has these blues in it. And I didn't want to put this palette as number 1. This is my number 1 palette, and I had to. This was in my Shop My Stash last month. It's been in my Shop My Stash a few times since I've bought it because I can't stay away from it. If anything, Just a Kiss, this like glittery top shade, is one of my favorite shadows in my entire collection. It looks good on everything. If you want any look to look extra special and dazzling, just put Just a Kiss over top and it looks amazing. It looks good as an inner corner highlight. It's just beautiful. The transition shades are perfect. They blend together really well. They create a lot of dimension on the eyes. The shimmers are gorgeous. The duochrome is perfect. Everything about this palette I love, except for the price. It was very expensive. But Desi and Katie knocked it out of the park with this. I can't get enough of it, and I had to put it as number 1. And that, guys, is it. That is my entire eyeshadow palette collection, ranked from my least favorite to my most favorite. And that really did feel like picking my favorite child. That was very difficult. Now, again, I love all of my eyeshadow palettes for the most part, minus the ones that I said I might end up decluttering. But for the most part, I like all of my palettes. I kind of try to keep my collection streamlined to things that I actually really like. So that was difficult for me, but I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up down below. Also, make sure to hit that subscribe button before you leave, and hopefully that means I see all of you guys in my next video. Bye!